Hello, welcome to Audiobooks All Day. We're so happy to have you joining the show today. Today we are covering, as you may have noticed when you clicked on the episode, The Art of War. It is going to be amazing. We're very excited about it. This book was much shorter than I had thought when I started out listening to it. I did not know it was going to be this short, but it was well done on Audible and so good. It was really good. It's kind of a harder one to listen to because there's so many good nuggets that you want to write down and so many good quotes. So I had to kind of go back and re-listen to write down some of my favorite quotes. But this thing is gold. And I kind of almost wonder how it changed warfare if everybody is operating on these same rules. It's
So
interesting.
this book, a little bit of history behind it. It's attributed primarily to somebody called Sun Tzu. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. Who was believed to have lived during the Eastern Zhou period. It's Zhou. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Which is during the late spring and autumn period, which is apparently, I have no idea what that means, but approximately the 5th century BCE. And this was a time when China was very fractured into a lot of different kind of like city states. And so there was a lot of war within China and trying to unify it. So the idea was that this was written as essentially the military textbook of the time as they were trying to unify. Um, yeah, I mean, you didn't have no internet back then, so books don't travel quite as fast. But yeah, um, it's funny. I've actually seen this book on a lot of like lists for best business books or even best self development books to listen to when the topic is war. So, I mean, if that tells you anything, just life and business and war are indistinguishable, apparently.
Well, and just to kind of like put a like exclamation point on that, one of my favorite quotes from the book is a military force has no constant formation. Water has no constant shape. The ability to gain victory by changing and adapting according to the opponent is called genius.
That's freaking deep. That's awesome. I
But
love
like
that.
has so many business applications. I love it. And so the book does have just like a lot of great gems in it. In it, there's kind of like five primary sections, which I have in my notes here. So, really, the book is put down into five different points that he really wants you to take away. And they are called the way, heaven, earth, the commander, and the method and discipline. So, these five different things are the biggest components to battle. And the one that I wanted to focus on, because, like a couple of them are pretty intuitive. Like the way is like alignment that you have with the troops. Heaven is like forces of nature. Earth is the terrain that you may have. The commander, and that's the attributes of the commander. And then finally, the method and discipline is kind of like the discipline of the army. And I found these super, super interesting. And he said the person that masters these is the person that wins. And I think that it's kind of cool because some of them you can't change and some of them you can change. And so like it's either there like, so heaven you can't, you know, um, like you can't predict it, you can't control it, but you can use it. And the person who uses it most effectively is the one that will wind up winning. And so a skilled commander takes advantage of that. And I thought that was really cool. Like there's just some things that can change and there's some things you just wind up using as leverage, but none of it is seen as a disadvantage, right? The terrain is an advantage. The weather is an advantage. You just need to use it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And just to go along a little bit more, it's, just like with what you were saying, taking all those aspects and then this book has a lot of lists. So it has like these five major things and then has a bunch of different lists like types of terrain, ways to use fire, and a bunch of different lists like that. But it's all about turning disadvantages into advantages. And it's all about being strategic. It's that if you have disadvantages, don't engage. Retreat, gain an advantage, then engage. And so much of the book is like it's not about being fair. It's not about fighting, toe to toe or on even ground. It's about, it's a general's job to make the ground work for them, to put yourself in the most favorable position. And even if you're in a favorable position, to put yourself in a more favorable position. Because the whole point is that no fight should ever be a fair fight. The fight should always be in your favor. And like you're saying, there are many things that you can do as a commander, as a person, to make those things in your favor.
Yeah, and one of the only things that I really remember him saying to not do, he's like, just never try and siege a big fort, or like a big walled city. He's like, never try and siege it. He's just like, that just never works. I like too, just some other points is he's like, defense is just as important as offense. You need to be constantly thinking about that. I also like how he says, and this is kind of more to what you were saying, every single enemy has a weakness. Every one of them. Everybody has weakness, and you need to exploit it. And sometimes it's not the overwhelming force that's going to beat it. It's like sometimes the most, your strategy can totally outdo brute force, or bigger numbers. And I thought that was pretty powerful. One of my favorite principles that he talks is about momentum. And he talks about it. It's just like rolling, like something that's rolling down a hill. If you are able to be the one that builds momentum, you actually totally become unstoppable. Because momentum is not just, it's not just like a speed thing. It's like an energy thing, and the enemy can feel it, and you can feel it, and everybody feels this momentum. It's like an actual rolling down. And there have been times in my life where I've felt this momentum and where I felt almost unstoppable. And I just think that was a super good principle to try and capture that as a commander and recognize when you have it. Because then he's like, when you recognize that you have it, keep going, don't stop.
Right, and then also how to build it. Time and time again. We've already kind of hinted on this, but that no detail is too small. The weather is important. Your logistics are important. The time of year is important. When the rainy season is important. When people want to be home because they want to be farming their own lands is important. When everything from really obvious things like how many weapons you have and your defensible position to very, very minute things. It's all important, and all of those things can either chain against you or for you in momentum.
He talks a lot about the element of surprise. He's like, always make your enemy think you're doing something you're not. If you want to go fast, make sure he thinks you're going slow. If he thinks you're going one way, try and make him think you're going another. And he talks so much about like spies and deception, and about how critical that is to war. He's like, you need to have spies. He's like, the more you confuse your enemy, the more they will hurt themselves. And I thought that was so interesting. And I think it's really hard to do, to make the enemy thinking you're going one way. But he says constantly, you always need to be thinking that the enemy, you always need to make your enemy think you're doing something that you're not, like the complete opposite. Always, like if you're strong, make them look like you're weak. If you have a strong position, or like if you have a weak position, trying to make it look strong. It's just so interesting. Like they're kind of simple. Something else that was kind of like fun is like he talked about like time it takes soldiers to march. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, oh, that's not super applicable to today. Not that soldiers don't march, but more just like his calculations for how long it would take them to get somewhere. But then I was thinking, like, the more the principle is that like maneuverability and like your ability to move, and like, because sometimes you can only go so fast, and so being aware at how fast you could actually move troops, supplies, is super important, because you could either get overextended or maybe you can't take advantage because you're not going fast enough. So many good lessons.
It's funny that I thought it was telling that a book about war is almost exclusively about deception and logistics. And, he doesn't say this explicitly, but in talking about different things, that essentially, if you can maintain that upper hand in deception and you have that strategy and you're able to master your own logistics, he doesn't talk about, formations and drills and, types of armaments or mixes of your company. It's all about getting your people in the right frame of mind and in the right place at the right time. And that all those other things I'm sure are important, but the most important thing as a commander is to get people in the right place at the right time with the right mindset. Now, all the other stuff is nice, but just get them there at the right time. And as importantly, get your opponent in the right place at the right time. And that timing is where battles are won and lost. I love this quote. He talks a lot about knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. And it's a really long quote, but this part of it I think is awesome. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
Yeah, because he talks a lot about knowing the outcome of a battle before you ever engage in it. And that's such a cool principle. And then also I found the quote about momentum. It says, when an army has the force of momentum, even the timid become brave. When it loses the force of momentum, even the brave become timid. And he does talk about, how essentially you lose momentum by scope creep, essentially. You lose momentum by trying to do too much. The second you try to do too much, you get too slow. So it's all about the quick victories. And then I love this quote too. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even at the point of soundlessness. Thereby you can be the director of the opponent's fate. So to kind of go along with what you were saying, right? Like, you are the architect as much of your success as you are of their destruction. And while that's super manipulative, I just think that it's really interesting that, like, in life, we have way more control than we think that we do. Because the way that we live out our lives actually has impacts on how other people live their life too, for good and for bad. Our little sphere of influence, or at least this is how I try and relate it to my own life, right? Is that all of us have this little sphere of influence, and that we can help orchestrate by our actions others even. And like, we all like to think that we're super independent, that we make our own decisions, and to some extent that's true, and for others it's more true than other people. But really, we are all super influenced by what's around us, and that we influence it. Like what he's saying, essentially, like, as an army, you can orchestrate your opponent's defeat just as much as you can orchestrate your victory. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Just like you're saying, and taking that and applying it to us, thinking about my personal goals and what I want to accomplish in work and with my family personally, time and time again, I really like, I just said the part about knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. I mean, you could change that to know yourself and know your goal, know your obstacles, and also just strategizing, understanding all of the details that go into what you want. If I want to get ready to run a marathon, right? It's not just about running. It's not just getting out and running. Just like with the soldiers, it's not just about going out and fighting. It's about planning. It's about preparation. It's mental preparation. It's physical preparation. It's understanding, all right, how I can't run a marathon today. How much do I have to run if I want to run it in 6 months? How much do I want to ramp up? How much can I run today? How do I take care of my body? How do I hydrate? How do I give myself the proper nutrition? And taking care of all those other details, and knowing myself, knowing my journey, and knowing the enemy, which I guess in this case is the marathon, or knowing the goal, you're able to orchestrate a victory, and all you need to do is then take the steps. Now, it's not always that easy, but a properly laid plan gives you the steps to victory. And that's what he's saying, that what's going to happen in a battle before you've done it, because you know what you're going to do.
Two last little quotes that I super liked. This one was it kind of caught me by surprise, but I think that there's some interesting things in it. But it says, do not stop an army on its way home. And a surrounded army must be given a way out. Do not press a desperate enemy. I think that's interesting. But I think one of my favorite quotes of everything is, be prepared and you will be lucky. I think that, truly the luckiest people I know are the people that worked the hardest to be that way. Like, I think that there's no, like, I heard this phrase and it's always been internalized. It's like, success breeds success. Failure does the same thing, but like that idea of that momentum, right? But like the more you prepare, the more you're going to get lucky. Luck will come to you. And anyways, I just love this thought because I think in my mind, war is just so chaotic. It's so random. It's so formless, but like it is actually strategic. Can be engineered and it can be predicted based on kind of those five different points. And if somebody's able to master those, then they will win. And so, I think there's great business and personal applications to all of this as we try and engineer our.
Absolutely. I love that quote. Be prepared and you will be lucky. And that same principle, that is right there in Green Lights, the book by Matthew McConaughey, and in The Richest Man in Babylon. Like, those are two primary themes of both of those books. Be prepared, do your work, and you will be lucky. And, that luck is something that you achieve by consistent, good effort and preparation. And I just love that. And it's very much in line with a lot of the books we've been reading.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think for me, this book probably takes a couple listen throughs to get it, but thankfully it's short. Again, with any strategy book that doesn't have like a set narrative, it's always harder to get more out of it. So it takes maybe a couple of those listens. I also just pulled up a bunch of like guides before I listened to it to kind of help get me in the headspace. And even still, like there's way more that I need to absorb from it. But just for all you people that listen to audiobooks, right? Definitely get the one on Audible, just the free one. It's great. I highly recommend it. And yeah, please let us know what you think. I think that this is a great book and I look forward to listening to it again.
Yeah. Oh, and just like Jeff was saying, this is a book that's written about strategy. It's a military handbook. You're not supposed to get everything all at once. When I'm reading these books, sometimes I just pick one thing and I try to see it throughout the book. And then next time I'll pick something else. But yeah, it's a great book. Like Jeff said, read it. You won't.
Thanks for joining Audiobooks All Day. Catch you next time.